Here's how Clarkson beat the government. Not with lawyers, not with money, with a camera crew and a car park. West Oxfordshire District Council tried to shut his farm shop down. They lost. Worse than lost. They built it. That's the claim. Now here's the proof. 900 people showed up demanding the council reject his planning application. The council said no to almost everything he asked for. A restaurant, blocked. An expanded car park, blocked. A wider range of produce, restricted. Everyone assumed that was the end of the story. A rich man's hobby farm quietly strangled by local bureaucracy, the way 1,000 other rural planning disputes end every year in Britain. It wasn't a planning dispute. It was the most effective free marketing campaign in British farming history. And the council paid for every episode. By the end of this, the only question you'll have left is why every other struggling business in Britain hasn't worked out how to lose to a council on purpose. Go back to 2008. Clarkson bought 1,000 acres in Oxfordshire for £6 million. Farming margins are brutal, and year one proved it. The farm cleared just $144 in profit. That's not a typo. That's the entire first-year return on a £6 million purchase, less than most people spend on a weekly shop. Clarkson, the son of a Paddington Bear toy salesman from Doncaster, had never run a farm in his life. He'd arrived at the whole project sideways, through television instinct rather than agricultural training, which turned out to matter more than anyone realized at the time. Farmers who'd worked the land for generations looked at the numbers and assumed the project would quietly fold within 2 years, the way these things usually do. It didn't fold. It found a second income stream nobody in agriculture was measuring. But here's what nobody in British agriculture had understood yet. Amazon was paying £10 to £12 million a year for the rights to film it. The farm didn't need to turn a profit on its own. It needed to keep generating story. A bad harvest wasn't a disaster. A bad harvest was Tuesday's episode. The farm isn't the business. The farm is the film set. And Amazon was paying the rent. That's loop 1 closed. Here's loop 2, and it opens with a fight. West Oxfordshire District Council received objections over Clarkson's plans to expand the farm shop and add a restaurant. Local residents complained about traffic, about noise, about the sheer number of cars turning up on narrow country lanes never built for that kind of footfall. The council listened, and the council rejected the restaurant plan outright. They capped the car park. They restricted what the shop could sell to produce sourced within 16 miles of the farm gate. On paper, that's a business getting smaller. In practice, it was the opposite. The council thought they had leverage. They were providing the narrative. Stop. Because what comes next is the reason the council ended up doing more for Clarkson's business than any marketing agency could have managed with an unlimited budget. Almost nobody reported it properly. The farm shop opened with £44,000 in assets. Within a year, that had grown to £1.34 million. Today, it earns an estimated £2 million annually and pulls in around 25,000 visitors a year on a farm track in rural Oxfordshire for jam and honey and a bag of potatoes grown a field away. The 16-mile sourcing rule was supposed to cripple the shop's supply chain. It was designed to limit scale, to keep the operation small and local and manageable. Instead, it forced the business to find small local producers nobody else was buying from. Cheesemakers, beekeepers, small growers who'd spent years selling at farmers' markets for pocket change. Clarkson's partner Lisa Hogan has said that restriction ended up being one of the best things that happened to the shop, because it gave the place something no supermarket chain could copy, no matter how much they spent trying. This was never a farm shop. It was a loyalty machine that Tesco, with $65 billion in annual revenue, cannot replicate. Loop 3 opens here, because the council wasn't the only thing everyone underestimated. The brewing industry looked at Hawkstone Lager the way it looks at every celebrity drinks brand, a novelty line stocked in a handful of pubs that fades once the cameras move on to the next thing. Nobody in that industry thought a beer brewed on a struggling Oxfordshire farm posed any real threat to their shelf space, their distribution deals, their decades of brand loyalty. Hawkstone brought in £7.8 million 1 year. The next year, $21.3 million. That's 134% growth, with 53 people now employed at the brewery and the beer stocked in 2,000 pubs across the country. Numbers like that don't happen to novelty brands. Novelty brands plateau. This one kept climbing. Carlsberg came in with an offer worth £50 million, against a brewery some estimates put at £75 million in total valuation. Clarkson turned it down. The failure is the product. That's not a slogan. That's the actual business model. Loop 4, and this one's been sitting underneath the whole story the entire time. Caleb Cooper was already working at Diddley Squat before Clarkson bought it. Nobody cast him. Nobody scripted his personality, his bluntness, the way he talks to Clarkson like an equal rather than an employer. He was already there, already exactly himself, and the camera simply found him standing in a field doing his job. This was never a farm manager. It was the most valuable unscripted character in British television, and nobody cast him. He was already there. You cannot manufacture that. You can only find it and then point a camera at it. Loop 5 opens with a pub. The farmer's dog cost £1 million to buy and renovate. It employs 146 people. It has 360 car park spaces, and they fill up on a weekend the way the farm shop's car park fills up on a Tuesday afternoon in August. The pub wasn't built to serve food. It was built to close the loop, a place where the beer, the produce, and the audience all sit down at the same table, and every plate served reinforces every episode already aired. A visitor who buys honey at the shop, drinks Hawkstone at the pub, and watches the show that made both of them famous isn't 3 separate customers. They're one customer, moving through the same machine 3 times. It is not a farm. It is a flywheel. Now stand back, because here's where every one of those loops connects. The council tried to block a car park expansion and ended up manufacturing the most talked-about planning dispute in British farming. They tried to limit sourcing and ended up building the shop's entire identity. They tried to protect the local area from disruption and instead handed a television production an unlimited supply of free conflict, season after season, without ever once being paid a production fee. The council thought they were the regulatory authority. They were in practice unpaid co-writers on a television series that was making Clarkson's farm more famous with every objection they raised. That's the reframe nobody states clearly enough. Every single obstacle placed in front of this business became part of the product, not despite the council. Because of them. Take away the objections, and the show loses its central tension. Take away the sourcing restriction, and the shop loses the story that makes people queue for an hour to buy a jar of chutney. Here's what's genuinely still uncertain, because an honest story doesn't pretend every part of this is solved. Farming margins remain thin regardless of how well the television and retail side performs, and a bad harvest could still hit the base of the whole operation harder than any brand rival ever could. The television deal won't run forever, and nobody, not Clarkson, not Amazon, has said publicly what happens to the shop, the pub, or the brewery once the cameras eventually stop rolling. A business built this tightly around one show carries a risk no ordinary farm or brewery has to think about. But look at the full picture as it stands today. £6 million in land is now valued at £45 million. A shop that opened with £44,000 in assets now earns roughly $2 million a year from a sourcing rule designed to hold it back. A beer brand nobody took seriously turned down $50 million because its own growth curve was worth more than the exit. A pub with 360 parking spaces sits at the center of all of it, and a council that spent years trying to slow the whole thing down ended up as the single biggest reason people kept watching in the first place. That is not a farming show. That is the most complete accidental business empire built on camera in the last decade, and the government helped build it without ever meaning to. If you've enjoyed today's story, do subscribe and tap the notification bell. We'd genuinely love to know. Do you think the council ever realized what they were actually doing? Drop it in the comments below. Thank you, as always, for watching.